Steve, I'm really excited to speak with you. I'm just going to jump right in. So in 2000, you graduated from Indiana University with a business marketing and criminal justice degree. And then within a year, you're at Yellow Pages as a search engine marketing specialist. What drew you towards this career?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think the honest answer is so my first job out of college was I was a Yellow Pages rep. I actually sold Yellow Page ads and worked with a lot of PI firms back in the print days. I always loved marketing. I knew I wanted to be on the marketing side, but I had gone through a recruiter, and at the time I was in Chicago, and there was one phone book. There was essentially a monopoly from the phone company's book, and Yellow Book, which is now Haibu, essentially broke up that monopoly. And so we went out and, worked with local businesses and said, hey, there's going to be a new phone book. You're a personal injury lawyer. You're a local dentist. You kind of need to be in the phone book. I mean, before Google, if you're a local business, the Yellow Pages was, your primary marketing channel. So yeah, I was a Yellow Pages rep before Google. And I don't even know if I've told you this, but I think you'll appreciate this. So personal injury, and it's always been, one of, if not the most competitive marketplaces, period, let alone for attorneys. And so, you think of a new phone book coming out, and in those days, unlike Google, where it's obviously an auction and you're literally bidding and paying to be in those top spots for Google ads, in those days, you were basically grandfathered in, right? So the first attorney that had the first double full page ad, they used to call it a double truck. You were basically grandfathered in. And so when when our phone book came out, we literally had PI firms, they came to our office, and guys basically wanted to be the first ad in the phone book. Guys were willing to pay more than other firms. It was almost like the original auction, right? And so we held a lottery. We held an actual lottery with
Wow.
and ping pong balls were drawn, and that's how that's how firms, and it was mostly personal injury, and we had criminal defense and family law firms, but mostly PI, and it was done on a lottery basis. And so that was my first kind of foray into local online marketing for attorneys. And I think as most of us know, Google didn't launch Google Ads really to the public until the end of 2001, beginning of 2002. But for a long time, the Yellow Pages was still very viable, and it was a big source of new leads and cases for law firms.
Absolutely.
And and then for me, it was just kind of a natural transition from print to digital. And I think, without getting into too much detail, I think what happened really those PI attorneys who, had their practices back then can attest to this. But I think the Yellow Pages because they had a huge customer base. They had hundreds of thousands of local businesses. And, as the internet was becoming, the internet, and right after sort of the .com boom, the Yellow Page businesses thought, well, we have this big user base. We have all these customers. They're just going to use, yellowpages.com and yellowbook.com to go find an attorney. And then, obviously Google came and they didn't wipe them off the planet right away. It took some time, but for me, I certainly knew it was a dying industry. And so after about 5 years on the Yellow Pages side, the Haibu, in fact, started offering search engine marketing to local businesses, but they were a print company. They didn't really understand it. And so, so a couple of years later, I ended up working for what is now one of the biggest search marketing agencies in the world for law firms and for small businesses. But yeah, I started out as a phone book rep.
That's unreal. So you really saw just kind of the change that was happening when you went from print to, pay-per-click. So, I want to highlight a couple things before, so you were one of the top 1% of new business revenue at Haibu, and then you jumped over to Reach Local, and you're the number one consultant of the year out of 1,100 employees, and you help manage over 20,000 clients in 11 countries with search marketing. how was that transition? What were some of the keys to your success there? And then ultimately, why did you strike out on your own for legal marketing arm?
Sure, sure. Yeah, I mean, well, I was essentially a sales rep, right? I mean, I was on the sales and marketing side, and in those days, they had, there was a separate department. They had software. They had a system in place for actually managing and executing the campaigns. And I was, in my 20s, and I was reaching out to local businesses and working with them to do their search engine marketing. I think with Reach Local was an interesting experience. I mean, it was great in a lot of ways. They were really kind of the first. Really, they had sort of the similar model as the Yellow Page model, and without naming names, a couple of the big players today in the legal marketing space sort of have that, the sort of sales volume model, and it was really that model. And Reach I got there when they were a startup. And I was one of the first employees there and helped build and kind of grow the company to, and then a couple years later, the company went public. They launched an IPO. I think when I left, they were maybe a $500 million run rate business. They had grown pretty substantially. You mentioned the 20,000 clients. That was for the whole company. I obviously didn't manage that many businesses, but yeah, I was a consultant and really more of a sales rep, and partnered with local businesses to do their search. And because of the fact that I had always worked with attorneys in the Yellow Page days, that was really kind of my niche, and those were the businesses that I seek to partner with when I was at Reach. And then I think and you can probably, I know you can relate to this. In our industry, it's and the reason why I ended up leaving and going out on my own. I just think it's very difficult to scale a digital agency. And I think, and I always look at your company. I think you guys you're that great sort of size in the middle where you're not, you don't have hundreds or thousands of employees where you can't really, give the level of service that a law firm needs. But Reach, yeah, we had thousands of employees and 50, 60 offices, right? And it's very difficult to scale a search marketing business because you can't take a law firm. I always say that it's easier in a lot of ways to scale a law firm. Not that it's easy to do that, but it's easier to scale a law firm because in a lot of ways you can rinse and repeat the same processes, right? If you have the volume, if you have the lead volume, personal injury, for example, it's easier to scale around volume because the processes are the same. Whereas with internet marketing, you can't really, you can't have this, even if it's a PI firm in St. Louis and a PI firm in New York that go after the same type of cases, you can't just rinse and repeat the same strategy, the same keyword strategy, the same ad copy. You can't have the same landing pages. Every firm is a little bit different. And I think that's what, the companies that tend to grow really quickly and scale revenue wise tend to, the retention, I mean, you can, it's public information now, but the retention just wasn't there. And the margins, I mean, companies like that are notorious for charging a lot, and they're not always transparent with the margins. And so once the company went public, and really all of the, the financial data and the gross profit margin and all of that became public, and you saw, how much of a law firm's budget was really going to Google and Bing or Yahoo versus the company, I knew that there was a much better fit, and that and I think, and I know you can relate to this too. I just think, especially with PI and markets where it's so competitive, it's hard to have a big sales company as your marketing partner. And I think attorneys really appreciate the sort of boutique, agile, nimble companies that can make changes and adjustments and optimizations quickly, that aren't just going to pass you off to a junior account manager and give you the same attack. You use the same plan of attack as they are with other firms. It just doesn't work that way, and it's too competitive not to really dive into each particular campaign and each particular business. And so yeah, I think that's really what ultimately caused me to want to go out on my own. and be able to, provide high quality leads and cases for attorneys, and do it, without a lot of the red tape and all the other things that kind of come with some of these massive sales and marketing organizations that just don't always have the law firm's best interest in mind. It's just kind of the way it is. But
Yeah, and what I'm hearing is, yeah, it's that moral code, and probably you had in this deeply ingrained in you, your willingness, and you wanted to compete and be the best at something. And that when you see someone that's doing average work and there's a lot of churn, even though they're successful, it kind of, the moral code kind of triggers some things there. Um,
absolutely.
yeah, and I also want to highlight, yeah, personal injury, marketing specifically. One of the reasons why I really wanted to have you on this show is you've been doing pay per click for law firms for what, 15 years, and
Yeah.
we're really going to address some of the things that you've developed in regards to your skill set to be able to generate a better ROI because of that experience. But
Sure.
before we dive into some of the granular details, what are, let's just really high level, what are some of the benefits of personal injury law firms using pay per click?
Yeah, I mean, I think the high level benefits would be, I mean, it's, you are, when you advertise on Google, and same with SEO, and now, local service ads, the Google screened ads, when you market on Google, you're essentially, you're investing to line up, if you will, and, in front of people that are actively looking for your services. And so, I think, you hear the term, because SEO obviously takes time and it takes effort. And of course, once you start ranking, the way that you rank your law firm clients, and it becomes very residual, and it can be a massive ROI. I think with pay-per-click, I think a lot of times, you hear, well, you can sort of butt the line in some ways, right? And jump to the top of Google. There's a lot of moving parts to it, but yeah, I think just generally speaking, there's really since the Yellow Page days, there's really no other inbound marketing channel that's as direct response as people that are searching. They're
Right.
we used to say, even in the phone book days, they're searching kind of with their wallets open, right? They're looking to buy. Obviously, PI is contingency based, so they're not coming out of pocket with a retainer. But yeah, you're basically paying for warm leads, people that are looking for you in your market.
Yeah, and I think that's why it's so powerful in that, Google's whole revenue model, they have a lot of intent, hiring intent versus branding plays, and all those things are great, right? They all power the whole flywheel. But yeah, I just wanted to highlight that. And
Yeah.
so, and then let's just quickly address before we get in the actionable advice. I've heard, even recently, within the last month, I was on a call with a client, and they were like, well, isn't pay per click kind of just set it up and you're good to go, and I don't really need a deep expertise here? And I'm like, well, maybe if you're in a non-competitive market where you can actually, even if you make some mistakes, still generate that ROI. But you've got to really know your stuff when it comes to personal injury marketing, because I've seen prices anywhere from $300 to $600 a click for auto accident queries. So what are the advantages of working with a professional agency, an expert like yourself, versus trying to do it in-house yourself?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think, I think that I really, part of the brilliance of Google in a lot of ways, right? I mean, the reason that they do, what I think last year they did 167 billion or something from ad revenue. Well, depending on, if you include AdSense or not, but the reason that Google is the reason they're so profitable, and one of the reasons so many businesses invest, a big portion of their budget onto Google, is because, well, obviously they're paying for warm leads, but I think Google makes it easy enough for anybody to, to set up an account, to put your credit card on Google, to maybe bid on a few keywords, write a few ads. The fact that it's a self-serve platform, right? I think that encourages a lot of people to test out Google ads. And yeah, you have some firms out there that try and, run campaigns on their own. So on one hand, yeah, can you potentially run pay-per-click campaigns and manage and optimize them in-house, yourself? You certainly can, but you know, the firms that I've seen successfully, you know, successful doing it in house usually have a team of folks, because there's so many moving parts. I mean, the easy part really is you know, setting up the campaigns, picking a hand, you know, car accident lawyer, for example, auto accident attorney. Obviously, those, you know, sort of bottom of the funnel, low hanging fruit keywords, if you will. Really, you know, that the hard part is not setting a high bid on car accident lawyer, but you know, one of the many moving parts with really really, you know, getting the most out of your PPC budget is, you know, well, you have to avoid bidding wars, right? Because that, you're right, some of the markets where you know, you get one or two or three guys that are just going to outbid each other, and then suddenly, you know, you could be paying a couple $100 more just to get a click than you know. So avoiding bidding wars is a big part of it, but then, you know, testing and managing keywords, testing different match types. I think, you know, I mean, there's a lot of nuance, but the overall keyword strategy needs to be a lot more comprehensive and blended, we call it, as opposed to just going after, you know, car accident lawyer, truck accident attorney, and the most expensive and competitive, lowest hanging fruit. I mean, you don't need an agency to do that. That's kind of the easy part. The difficult and challenging part with it is really, you know, obviously testing and seeing what works for every single firm in their markets, but then getting the conversion data and trying to really optimize bids and budget, you know, on, you know, not just the keywords that are driving traffic, but the ones that are making the phone ring. And then, you know, you take it a step further, which is probably a separate conversation because not every law firm uses CRM, but looking at the quality of the lead. And, you know, we may be able to, you know, generate leads at a low cost, but are they, you know, are they the type of leads you want? And I think PI is one of those situations where sometimes if you know, if let's say a firm has a relatively limited budget and they're trying to make the most of it, I think it's kind of, it's sort of a natural tendency for an agency. And we were just looking, in fact, at some campaigns of last week of a client and partner of yours. And, you know, they were taking the approach of bidding really, really low, and that's kind of what we call bottom fishing, because on one hand, it's good. You know, you want to obviously try and maximize the budget and get as many leads as you can for the budget. But I think one of the tricky things with PI, and this is where the bid management really comes into play, is if you're bidding too low for personal injury searches, right? And your ad is too far down the page, like if you're below the fold and you're not in those top spots, oftentimes you're going to get people that find, you know, by the time they get to your website or landing page, they may have already reached out to 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 other attorneys who told them, you know, you don't have a case. And so there's a fine line between bidding low enough to be able to maximize your CPL and CPA and bidding aggressively enough on the right keyword variations, of course, to generate, you know, sometimes it's worth paying a little bit more per click or per lead if it's going to be a higher quality case and you can convert those. So there are a lot of moving parts with it. And yeah, I mean, Google makes it easy enough for people to get started on Google and to try and run campaigns. And I think a lot of attorneys, frankly, kind of are under the, you know, they're in that mindset, well, I can do it myself and I don't need to pay an agency to do it. Well, Google, you know, personal injury keywords, and I know you know this, but I mean, think of every word, you know, in the dictionary, any word that you can bid on Google Ads of any industry. Personal injury lawyer keywords are literally the most expensive and competitive ones. Now, they're competitive for a reason, of course. They're competitive because obviously the, you know, the return on investment, you know, with the fees that, you know, that personal injury law firms can make, it's often worth it to be able to pay, you know, even a couple $100 per click. But yes, it gets to the point to where it can become cost prohibitive and not make sense if, on certain keywords anyway, if it gets bid up too high, if the cost per click is too high, you know, and then the other side of the argument really is, how's your conversion rate on your website or your landing pages? Are you A/B test, you know, are you doing what you can to maximize that traffic? It's not just about keyword and bid management and getting the right traffic at the right cost. It's about converting those visitors, and there's, you know, a whole host of other things that go into it. But that would be, yeah, I guess that would be my response to, you know, can attorneys try and manage pay-per-click in-house? They certainly can, but it's really challenging. And, you know, we always say Google will, Jesse, our first employee who's been with me about 10 years, He always says Google will eat your wallet if you're not very, very careful. And it's true, especially with the way, they just changed up. I know, a couple weeks ago, now there's, modified broad keywords are being phased out, and so there's different things with the word order. And Google, at the end of the day, Google does things to, they're still a publicly traded company. They're beholden to their shareholders, and they'll do certain things to where it makes it a little bit more ambiguous, and you might see bidding wars. Last fall, you may or may not know, they essentially got rid of something like 80% of the actual search terms within Google Ads.
Yeah.
And I know you can relate on
that
the
was
SEO
very
side.
frustrating because we use that data for SEO.
Exactly. So Google's constantly making changes and evolving their platform and the features and functionality in there where if you're not really, really meticulous and careful, and if you're not constantly, split testing and trying to keep up with Google, then you can spend and waste a lot of money really quickly.
Right.
If you don't have all your ducks in a row, for sure.
Yeah, let's jump right in. You really took it high level right at the beginning, and I love it because I know many of our users listening are, they're top attorneys. They're
Right.
elite personal injury attorneys, and they've been in the game. They've experimented with pay per click. Maybe they haven't found the right agency or the right person, but it's definitely a good channel if you work with the right partner. And
Right.
there's a few things that you mentioned as it specifically relates to the optimization of campaign, the ad copy, right? So you got to have some copywriting skills, the landing pages. So you got to have a designer dev with some creative components. You got to have good UX. So you got to have a CRO type person. Then you got to have daily management, because if you just set a bid, you get in these auction wars, these auction battles, and you can overpay. So there has to be daily management there. And there's all kinds of management. Let's talk specifically about the conversion side of things. Let's just jump right into, high level, what makes a good landing page for pay per click?
Yeah, it's a good question. Well, there's a lot of elements of a page which which have been proven to convert. And I think, let me say this, I think one of the interesting things when it comes to design and it comes to user experience, I think very generally speaking, design design in general, and I don't mean web design or landing page design, but just design is typically subjective, right? You may like one thing, I may like another, the way something else looks. And then, but with landing page design and with web development and UX, user experience, there's been there's data, right? There's statistics. There's been A/B testing now for many years, to where there's proven empirical evidence that shows certain elements of a website or a landing page or a mobile site have been proven to convert. So while we may have an attorney say, I don't know if this is a good example, but our logo needs to be really big and it needs to be right in the center of our mobile header, or I want to move up our case results here. But if you want me to list off a handful of things that we've seen work really well, I think, look, I would say it's less is often more with personal injury on the landing page side. I think obviously on the SEO side, you need more content, you need to build more links, you need to be the subject matter expert and the authority on personal injury. But with pay-per-click, I think, because you're paying to drive that visitor there, and I think also because with personal injury, because it's contingency based and they're not asking for money up front, I think that allows for personal injury firms to have more of the less is more approach, to where you don't need navigation and menu bars to 100 other pages on your site. If somebody's Googling, looking for a slip and fall attorney, you obviously want to drive them to a page on the attorney's site that speaks to slip and fall. But I don't, oftentimes, less content is more, because the goal is to get them to call, right? The goal is to get them to convert, to call, to fill out a form, to live chat if you're using live chat. So
Yeah, and Steve, I really wanted to jump in there real quick, and I didn't want to break your stride here.
No.
But so I just wanted to highlight that for our audience. So the optimization techniques for pay-per-click are directly contradictory to SEO. SEO, you want long form content. You want these really robust pages that answers tons of questions, internally links to all these pages. to get Google to crawl the page and to rank it for multiple keywords. Pay per click, you literally want a contact form. If the contact form, if you can get them just to go to the contact form and you have maybe just a little bit of copy to entice them to go through, I mean, that's the difference. So a lot of times they're like, well, our audience listening, should I just do pay per click and drive it to my SEO landing pages? The answer is empirically no, you should not, because the strategies of how you would optimize the landing page for SEO are completely different pay per click. I just want to jump in there because I get that question a lot.
No, I'm sure you do. Yeah, 100%. It's yeah, it really is. It's quite the opposite in a lot of ways. So yeah, so less is more. Trying to drive that call to action. We always shoot for the phone call first. We try and push the phone call the most. If we had to rank them, I would say phone call, then live chat, then web form submission. Not that there can't be really quality form leads, but usually if you get somebody on the phone, they have a higher likelihood of having being a potential client. But so yeah, a lot of it's just focusing on the call to action. I think the messaging, and I hate to keep going back to the yellow page days, but I frankly, that if you think about a yellow page ad, right, a rectangular ad or a double ad, those were really the first landing pages, right? And so you have your headline, your sub headline, your social proof, which whether it's case results, testimonials, your accreditations and awards, things like that. Things like that are super important. And usually with web marketing, and I think specifically with mobile, because mobile people searching Google on their phones, it's 3/4 to 4/5, 70-80% ish of all Google searches now are happening on a phone. So the way that you have to optimize a mobile landing page versus a desktop and tablet landing page is different, right? And so the above the fold, right, where you land on mobile is a lot less real estate than it is on a desktop version or a laptop version. So yeah, I mean, so there's a lot of moving parts and a lot of different elements, but I think I would say less is more. I think just that instant credibility. A lot of the conversion process, I forget what the number is, but I think you might know this, but I think they say you have like 0.6 seconds or 0.2 seconds or something when somebody lands on a website, and it's usually subconscious, right? It's that first interaction, that first glimpse of the site, and you have to just convey that credibility, which is like having things above the fold, like whatever it is, social proof, accreditations, testimonials. They need to feel right away that, okay, this is obviously a credible firm. They seem to, and then you move on, because people can bounce really quickly, right? They can leave a website or a landing page in a second, right? The back button's right there. So you have to capture their attention quickly. We tend to try and put, some of the best CTAs, call to actions, and most relevant messaging towards the top of the page. But and then there's also, like, we use Hotjar, we use heat maps and recording sessions, so you can actually watch how people actually scroll and use the site, where they're leaving, and if we see that 50-60% of your users are not scrolling past this certain part on mobile, then we may move up certain case results or whatever it might be to try and convert them a little higher up on the page. So there's a lot of different things. I mean, that you can really get into the weeds with, font and colors, and, you always hear the button test when it comes to CRO and A/B testing, a red button versus a blue button. And so there's little A/B tests and things like that you can do. But I think just high level, yeah, you don't want to inundate them with content, right? You want to give them enough content that it shows them that the firm is reputable and that they can help them. But you don't want to but not overwhelm them with content to where they kind of have that cognitive overload to where they may just leave.
Absolutely, that's a million takeaways there. In terms of optimization, and so I kind of want to transition over to something that's a little bit more, I guess, controversial, but it's very prevalent in the PI space. So when you see individuals bidding on competitors' names, if you're an individual, if you're a personal injury law firm, what, if anything, can you do to prevent your competitors from bidding on your name?
Yeah, great question. The short answer is, if your firm name is trademarked, then if it's trademarked and part of the trademark database, Google won't allow other competitors to bid on your name. But obviously most PI firms don't have their names trademarked. So the real answer is, yeah, because your firm name is a keyword, it does allow other competitors to bid on your name. There's a lot I really think it depends on this particular situation, and I'll dive into it because it can go either way. And you have to take into account, so it can definitely work. And I think the reason that you see a lot of attorneys doing it, and usually what they're doing it with other, personal injury firms in their market who maybe they invest a lot in TV and outdoor and things like that. And so you're sort of, piggybacking off of another firm's advertising and people that are, going on Google searching for them. And I think with PI, and whether it's the demographic of an average personal injury client, or whatever the factors are, oftentimes even if someone's seen a TV ad for years, by the time they get to Google, they don't always know. Sometimes someone bids on someone's name and they click and they call. I mean, I've listened to phone calls where PI attorneys have signed up cases of people that Googled another firm and they end up calling, and they don't even realize, I don't think, that they're actually not calling that firm. And then sometimes they tell them, well, this isn't firm A, this is firm B. And then sometimes they'll hang up. Sometimes, oh, I'm trying to call this firm. But sometimes they start to build the rapport with the intake person, and it can work. Obviously, the downside is, it can upset people, right? It can cause, other attorneys to say, well, why is this guy bidding on my name? I'm going to bid on his name, and I'm going to maybe click on his ad or whatever it might be. So I do think part of it is it's a personal preference. Not every attorney is comfortable doing it. But it's one of those things where, especially with is competitive as general, MVA, motor vehicle accident related keywords can be, oftentimes bidding on competitor names can work, but it's got to be the right situation. And usually if you're going to test it, it makes sense to test it on a firm's name who really does a lot of other advertising to where they're, branded enough in their local market that it makes sense to try it.
I have a really funny story. I can't even remember the year. It's been so long ago, but back in the day, I was working at an agency in St. Louis, and it was the Habish versus Canon case. And I was the pay-per-click specialist back in the day, because that was one of the first cases where the individual was bidding on the other firm's name.
Yes.
And that kind of set the precedent for this whole strategy. And it was really interesting. At the time, I was scared out of my mind. I thought I was going to get sued and go bankrupt. But anyways, that was really interesting. But yeah. I wanted to bring up this tactic, and I'm going to try to keep this confidential. The name may slip just because I'm going to try to keep it as confidential as I can. But I saw an interesting strategy by a firm, one of the largest personal injury firms in the US, that said, the subject email said, alleged use of X, which was X is their firm name, in Google ads. It came to our attention that firms are bidding on our name. Can you please add our name as a negative keyword? So it came across when I read the email like they were essentially telling the individual that they needed to stop bidding on their name, but they weren't actually indicating, they weren't directing it. It was kind of a way, alleged use, it was indicated, brought to our attention. Yeah. But it was a kind of a clever method to be proactive, to get other firms in your market to add their firm as a negative keyword. Can you kind of speak on this a bit?
Yeah, I will say I've seen letters like that in the past, right? Some attorney, I think in that case, especially if that firm, if it's not a trademark name and there's other people out there bidding on it, I think, I've seen people call and email or send a cease and desist and stop, even though it's not, they're not technically breaking the rules if it's not a trademark. But that is interesting, actually being proactive and asking them to not just stop bidding on it, but to add their keyword as a negative, just in case maybe somehow a similar term broad matches to that name, which I don't know, but I've seen that before. That's, maybe that firm, whoever it is, maybe if they invest a lot into whatever it is, Google and PPC, SEO, TV, radio, billboards, maybe that's just, something that they do to try and get people to stop, even though they technically can do it. But
Yeah.
yeah, I don't think I've ever heard of somebody actually suggesting to, negate their business name as a keyword, but it's an interesting thought. Yeah.
Yeah, it's really interesting because one of our clients received an email like that and forwarded to me. He's like, "Hey, add this firm as a negative keyword,"
Yeah.
and didn't really even read the, so obviously it worked. And but anyways, I just wanted to bring that up.
Yeah.
And another another thing, I had a question. This is just me personally. I don't know. So I want to kind of get your opinion on this. Google recommends testing three ads at a time. But to me, that had never made sense because every time I look at the data, there's like one ad that gets 10 impressions and I just quit showing it. I'm like, well, really, you didn't give that ad enough impressions to actually even get enough data to understand if it was something that could convert. So, is this just another thing of Google trying to get you to spend your money versus doing the two ad setup, or what's kind of your thought process on just the ad copy
Yeah.
optimization?
Yeah. It's a good question. According to Google, so you know what I mean when I say quality score and how that works, and I guess I
Yes.
should touch
Why
on
don't
it.
you, yeah, just briefly for our
Yeah,
audience.
yeah. So the amount that an attorney or any business pays per click on Google, it's dictated mainly by two things: your bid, obviously, what you're willing to pay per click, and then your quality score. So Google has what they call a quality score for every keyword that you're managing in your AdWords campaigns. Has a quality score. It's a number out of 10. Obviously, a 10 out of 10 is the best, and 0 out of 10 would be the worst. The higher your quality score is, the lower that you actually have to pay per click. What determines your quality score? There's several factors, but the main two would be your click-through rate, right? Google obviously wants to show ads in the top spots that they know are getting traffic and making Google money. And then the relevance of the ad and the landing page to that query. So Google made it official. I guess it's been maybe about a year and a half or so, where our agency reps told us that is now part of having, because it used to be where you could run one or two ads in an ad group and test it, and it didn't have an impact on your quality score. Google says now that if you don't have 3 ads minimum in an ad group, that it'll actually dock your quality score. I haven't actually seen it really dip because of that, and maybe it's because we test 3+ ads in a group, but so it's become part of the quality score algorithm. So if an attorney has an agency that's running their pay-per-click campaigns, definitely suggest that. But to your point, you brought up what I think is maybe an even more important point. So when you say an ad that they'll start to serve the ad more that gets more traffic, right? They don't care about the conversions. They want to show the ad that they're seeing get more traffic. But the default setting in Google Ads is the ad setting is to steer the budget towards higher performing ads. So the right thing to do, because of what you just said, if you don't set the ad, to rotate indefinitely at the beginning, where they do a straight split test or an ABC test with all the ads, then Google will automatically, even if it's a couple days in and it's a tiny sample size, and they see that one ad got a few more clicks, they'll immediately start steering the budget there. So that's just, but so yeah, and a lot of people make that mistake. They come out of the gates, Google says, hey, optimize your ads for the ones that get the most traffic, and people try and do it that way. But you have to rotate them indefinitely to start to get a real sample size and to get statistical significance on what ads are really working better, not the ones that Google's just going to steer budget to right away.
Absolutely, couldn't agree more. And I just kind of wanted to hear your opinion on that. And I didn't know that about the 3 ads and how it affected the quality score. So I was kind of being stubborn, wanting to do 2. 50% of the traffic goes to one, 50% of the traffic goes to the other. You got the winner. Okay, the winner stays, and then you introduce a new challenger, almost like a restaurant does a burger challenge or something.
That's the way it always was. Yeah, the A/B test, and now you got to ABC test it, and it's just it's as you know very well. Sometimes you have to adhere to the Google gods and play their game and do it the right way. But if you see, obviously, if out of those 3 ads, if one of them is the click-through rate and the conversion rate is lower, then obviously you want to swap that out with another one and try and continue to beat the other, the performance of the other ads. But yeah, that's that's something that's maybe a year and a half old, that is supposedly, Google doesn't actually document, the quality score. It's part of, it's always a little bit ambiguous, but our reps have told us that that's part of the algorithm now, that you have to have 3 ads if you want to, have the best chance at getting a good quality score at a lower cost per click.
And I want to highlight just a couple of things. When you're saying your reps, you're saying your actual Google assigned reps to your agency.
Our
That
agent
helps.
reps. Yep.
Right. And that's one thing that we need to highlight for our audience, is because when you do manage a certain budget, you'll have a Google assigned rep that helps you optimize accounts and give advice and let you know about new products that affect, the Google Ads platform. So it's a big advantage that, some individuals just don't have. So I wanted to highlight that. And then I wanted to just really briefly just kind of rapid fire on personal injury, negative keywords. Just some general guidance on negative keywords.
As far as how they work, or like what,
Not how they work. Just, if someone was wanting to set up just some main negative keywords, what's just like the brief 80-20, what are some negative keywords they would want to start with? And let me help you out here. Let's say St. Louis, Missouri, PI.
Yeah, it's a great question. I would say, so we have, from running PI campaigns for a long time, we have a library, I call it, of negatives. So we have hundreds and hundreds of negatives that are in there from different markets. Man, pro bono is always one that comes to mind, even though with PI it's contingency based, so they're not paying, but we typically make pro bono negative. Insurance, you have to be careful with the word insurance. And so, a lot of times you get people Googling about maybe their auto insurance or what it might be. And there's a lot of nuance there, because we actually do bid on, in some cases, insurance company names, right? The actual names, especially insurance companies that tend to have, bigger policies with other keyword modifiers. But oftentimes car insurance, things like that, you want to usually make negative in certain ad groups. I should look at my list and maybe I can send over a few, but there's so many. And a lot of times it's competitors, kind of per our conversation just now. You get a lot of people that, if that's not part of their strategy, if somebody Googles, and I say St. Louis because that's where I'm from, and I know you're from the area too. But if a PI firm in St. Louis, if somebody Googles, Brown and Crouppen personal injury lawyers St. Louis, you may want to make Brown and Crouppen negative if you're not Brown and Crouppen and you're just trying to get people that are, looking for attorneys. So competitor names, but man, there's a lot. But really, because every market's different, that's what the search terms that, that's part of optimizing a campaign, is looking at the queries, looking at the search term data, and adding negative keywords as they arise, as you start to see them. But yeah, there's usually a lot of negatives that we start with, just because we've run so many campaigns. But those are a couple that come to mind.
Absolutely. No, that's great. I just briefly wanted to touch on that because I think that's an important strategy to optimize a successful personal injury campaign. So, coming to a close here, Steve, we have a 3 for 3 segment. It's just a quick fire round, so go with your gut. So I'm going to ask you 3 quick questions.
Okay.
Which habit contributes to your success?
Wow, good question. I like that. I would say learning. I would say consistently learning, right? Our industry changes so much. Like I'm, and all of us, and we constantly reading, watching podcasts, watching YouTube videos, subscribing to all the Google blogs, just kind of like you probably follow, Matt Cutts and some of the SEO guys. A lot of it is really reading a lot and staying on top of trends and changes in the industry. So I think constantly learning, trying to make ourselves better, and always trying to remain that subject matter expert. I think I would say that's probably the habit that comes to mind. I would say, and I know it probably sounds cliche, but it really is all about the customer, right? It's all about the law firm. And I think a lot of it is, I would say communication, because oftentimes I think it's easy to get complacent to where, okay, we're working with another personal injury firm, but they're in this market, let's sort of build out this, the same model and have the same keyword strategy. I think a lot of it is just asking questions, what what's a reasonable cost per acquisition? Which cases are you really looking to get? Which geographic areas, do you tend to get, better quality leads than others? I think really digging in and finding out what a firm's real goals are and what the best strategy is. And I just think, in our industry, I think because there's so little barrier to entry and there's so many people out there that are, search engine marketing experts, and we can guarantee you number one rankings on Google and all this stuff. I think communication and I think transparency are two of probably the most important. I don't know if maybe that's not a habit. I guess the first answer is more of a habit, but I think those are the most important things that that have allowed us to be successful.
Wonderful. And which entrepreneur do you admire the most?
Which entrepreneur do I admire the most? That's a good question, man. Man, am I allowed to say you? Do you count? No, I do admire you a lot.
No, don't use me.
Yeah,
I'm done.
yeah. I honestly, I look up to guys like Steve Jobs and Elon Musk and people like that. But if I'm being honest, and again, it may sound cheesy, I would say my dad and my grandfather. In fact, just
Love that.
because we had a family business, and my grandfather started it. My dad, and his brothers ran it for 35, 40 years, and they've always been an inspiration to me. They were very successful, but they also, and it's kind of funny because they were in the closeout business. So they would they would import stuff from China and from overseas, and they would resell goods to Walmart and to dollar stores, things like that. So it's not the most glamorous industry, right? You're dealing with hard goods and all sorts of different trinkets and little things, and also in that industry, there was no barrier to entry, really, meaning, you and me today could start, go on Alibaba and start importing stuff from China and reselling it. And they took an approach, and this was, 40, 50 years ago. And so the name of the business was CWC. It was Closeouts with Class. So they used to go, and they would go to the trade shows, right? The big ASD show in Vegas. And they would go to these shows, and there'd be all these millions of people there in these booths. And my dad and my grandpa would show up in tuxedos. They would wear tuxes just to be goofy and to, but for them, it was always about, integrity and class and treating customers with the utmost respect. And they were very respected and well known in the industry for a long time. And I got to witness that and be a part of it. So I guess, I hope that's not too cheesy, but
I love that. I love that. That's wonderful. Yeah. Love that. And then last question here, if you had to recommend one business book, which would it be and why?
Man, God, these are good questions. That is a tough one. I think I think my first thought goes to the original Perry Marshall Google Ads book, but that's probably I wouldn't call that a high level business book. That's one I've read a bunch of times. That's a Google Ads specific book. God, what was the 22 immutable laws of marketing? That was a really good one. That was an old school book, but I think still has a lot of applications today. God, I loved Elon Musk's book. Those are the few that come to mind.
Wonderful.
What's your favorite? Curious what your favorite is.
Oh, so the one that immediately came to mind right when you asked that, and is the ultimate sales machine, Chet Holmes. Really love that book. That's one of the few marketing books I've read like 3 times. So I really, really enjoy it. Every time I read that, I get something. But yeah, so many. That's a tough question. I may need to change that up to top 3.
No, it's a good one. Maybe I need to be reading more. I'm not sure. Usually my stuff is so focused on our industry that I could admit that I haven't read as many high level business books lately. But those would be 3 that come to mind.
Awesome. Steve, it's been such a pleasure having you on the show. Thanks so much for your time.
Much, Chris. Yeah, always good talking to you, man. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely. Take care.
Okay. Have a good day. Bye.